Okay, from the sublime to the ridiculous. And the ridiculous is what's happening in Canberra at the moment. I'm pretty amazed by this. Now, I wrote a column just 2 weeks ago, and I said in that column that Malcolm Turnbull, either he was stupid, or in bringing down this legislation to change the way we vote for the Senate, he was making sure he was having a double dissolution on the 2nd of July because he'd have no choice. And he'd have no choice because he had totally alienated those backbenchers. And of course, in alienating them, it's not just that they won't pass any legislation for the next few months. The truth is, of course, they're there for another 3 years. And 3 years of people voting against you every time means you're a pretty useless government. So I guess he must have worked out that he was going to have a double dissolution on the 2nd of July. That's good. He didn't work anything else out too well, though. I can't believe this. I wrote in that same article how, obviously, the first few weeks of the election campaign would be dominated by the obvious trigger that would have come through in the last couple of weeks, and that was the legislation to introduce an Australian Building and Construction Commission to try and have a cop on the beat with the CFMEU. Remember all this publicity. They had a royal commission and they have belted the CFMEU uphill and down dale, as have I must say, because I think some terrible things were revealed in that royal commission about them and about some of their personnel. But the extraordinary thing, the amazing thing about this is he never bothered to bring in any legislation. And then we find out this week that he did a deal with the Greens not to bring it in, to only bring in that legislation that changed the voting. And so now he's in a terrible position, because unless he brings the budget forward, he's got no time whatsoever, no time to have that Australian Building and Construction Commission. And how does he go to a campaign, which, by the way, if he brings the budget forward, will be 8.5 weeks, and I'll get to that in a moment. That's electoral lunacy. But apart from that, what the hell's he going to do? How does he get up and say it's really important? So important was this Australian Building and Construction Commission that I didn't bother bringing in the legislation. He's going to look like a complete fool. And so when I said he was either stupid or he was planning on an election on the 2nd of July, I was wrong. He's stupid and he's planning an election for the 2nd of July. And I just find this whole thing bizarre. Where is the political judgment? You expect your leaders to have some. And now we're talking about actually moving the budget. Moving the budget because he didn't work out timetables. He couldn't understand when he had to bring this legislation in. So now the only trigger he's got is a registered organisations piece of legislation that means nothing to anyone, that no one's heard of. Walk down the main street of any capital city tomorrow, ask the first 100 people what it's about. Not one of them will tell you. It's meaningless. You can't go to a double dissolution on that. So therefore he's got to try and get this thing through, and that means he's got to bring the budget forward a week. That's just absurd. How can a government get itself into a mess this big? I don't understand it at all. No reform. This bloke has got no idea. When he came to power, he sounded so good, and he lifted us, and we needed lifting. I had really high hopes. Unfortunately, as I said on Rich Owen Jones last night, the Liberal Party got rid of Tony Abbott because they thought he had no judgment. They've elected Malcolm Turnbull and he's got no ticker. Very, very sad for all of us. Well, that having been said, in our Canberra studio we have Mitch Fifield from that very, very same government, our Minister for